The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, stamped with the Pine Valley HOA seal that Jennifer Torres had learned to despise. She held it in her trembling hands, the same hands that had just collected warm eggs from her backyard coop, and read the words that made her blood run cold. Final notice. Remove all livestock within 72 hours or face $500 daily fines and legal action. Jennifer, a 42-year-old occupational therapist who'd survived breast cancer twice and whose doctor had specifically recommended animal-assisted therapy for her PTSD, stared at the signature. Patricia Moreland, HOA president. 3 months of harassment, 3 months of bogus complaints, surprise inspections, and threats. But Patricia had made one critical mistake. She'd pushed a healthcare professional who knew exactly how the Americans with Disabilities Act worked. And today, everything was about to change. Before we dive into how Jennifer turned the tables on an HOA president who thought she was untouchable, if you love stories where entitled busybodies finally meet their match and justice is served with a side of legal brilliance, hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts: the violation that pushed a caring professional past her breaking point, the confrontation where knowledge became power, and the resolution where an entire HOA learned that some battles shouldn't be picked. Jennifer's chickens weren't just pets. They were part of her cancer recovery, recommended by her oncologist for therapeutic interaction and fresh organic nutrition during chemotherapy. But Patricia Moreland saw only rule violations and opportunities to flex power. What started as a friendly backyard hobby became a months-long campaign of intimidation, with Patricia weaponizing obscure HOA bylaws and rallying neighbors into a witch hunt. Jennifer tried reasoning, tried compromise, tried everything except the one thing that would finally work: fighting back with the full force of federal law. The confrontation wouldn't happen in an HOA meeting or through lawyers. It would happen on Jennifer's front lawn, with Patricia making her most aggressive move yet. Unaware that the exhausted cancer survivor she'd been tormenting had spent weeks consulting with disability rights attorneys and gathering documentation that would flip the entire power dynamic. The moment Patricia realized she hadn't been bullying a helpless homeowner, but rather someone who'd weaponized the ADA itself, would be captured on doorbell camera for posterity. The resolution wouldn't just save Jennifer's chickens. It would expose Patricia's pattern of harassment against other residents, trigger an HOA board investigation, and result in consequences that rippled through the entire community. Because when you push someone who's already survived cancer twice, you'd better be prepared for them to fight back with everything they've learned about resilience, research, and refusing to be a victim. Here's exactly how it happened. Jennifer Torres had bought the house on Maple Ridge Drive specifically for the backyard. After her second bout with breast cancer, her oncologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had been explicit. Reduce stress, increase meaningful activity, consider animal-assisted therapy. Jennifer's grandmother had kept chickens in rural New Mexico, and the memory of collecting warm eggs on summer mornings had sustained Jennifer through the worst of chemotherapy. 6 months after her final treatment, she'd installed a beautiful cedar coop, brought home 4 Plymouth Rock hens, Beatrice, Dolly, Henrietta, and Marigold, and felt genuinely hopeful for the first time in 3 years. The chickens were quiet, the coop was immaculate, and her neighbors on both sides had actually asked for extra eggs. For 8 blissful weeks, Jennifer had a routine that felt like healing. Then Patricia Moreland moved in 3 houses down. The first complaint arrived via email on a Wednesday in late March. Dear Ms. Torres, it has come to the attention of the Pine Valley HOA that you are harboring livestock in violation of Section 4.7 of our community bylaws. Please remove the animals within 30 days. Jennifer had read. Section 4.7, carefully before getting the chickens, it banned livestock farming operations, but made no mention of small-scale backyard chickens, which weren't even classified as livestock under county regulations. She'd responded politely, citing the county ordinance that explicitly allowed up to 6 hens on residential properties and attached photos of her spotless coop. She'd thought that would be the end of it. 2 weeks later, Patricia showed up during Jennifer's morning egg collection. Patricia was 63, with steel gray hair shellacked into an immovable helmet and the kind of rigid posture that suggested she'd never relaxed a day in her life. "Those need to go," she'd announced without preamble, gesturing at the chickens like they were toxic waste. Jennifer, still in her bathrobe and recovering from a restless night of cancer-related insomnia, had tried to explain. She showed Patricia the county ordinance on her phone. She mentioned her health situation, carefully because her medical history wasn't anyone's business. She offered to show Patricia how clean and quiet the operation was. Patricia had cut her off mid-sentence. "I don't care about your little health problems, Ms. Torres. Rules are rules. The HOA board will be voting on a livestock ban at next month's meeting, and I have more than enough votes to pass it." She'd walked away before Jennifer could respond, leaving Jennifer shaking with a mixture of fury and disbelief. The harassment escalated methodically. Patricia filed a complaint with code enforcement, which found no violations. She organized a petition among neighbors, lying that the chickens attracted rats and caused noise, gathering signatures from people who'd never even been near Jennifer's property. She scheduled surprise property inspections, arriving with a clipboard and measuring tape to document supposed infractions, once even trying to enter Jennifer's backyard without permission until Jennifer threatened to call the police. The worst incident came on a Sunday morning in early May. Jennifer had woken to find her coop's latch broken and the gate wide open. All 4 chickens were loose in the neighborhood, and by the time she'd corralled them, sobbing and exhausted in her pajamas, Patricia was standing on the sidewalk with her phone out, filming. "Look at this disaster," Patricia announced to her camera. "This is exactly why we have rules. These animals are a menace." Jennifer had seen the video later on the neighborhood Facebook group, captioned, "HOA President Exposes Reckless Neighbor." Jennifer had called the police about the vandalism, but the responding officer had been dismissive. "Probably just kids, ma'am. Maybe it's time to just get rid of the chickens? Would save everyone a lot of trouble." She'd tried attending the HOA meeting where the livestock ban was voted on, prepared with documentation and county ordinances, but Patricia had used procedural tricks to prevent Jennifer from speaking. The ban passed 4-2, with an effective date of June 1st and fines of $500 per day for violations. Jennifer had left that meeting feeling more powerless than she'd felt even during chemotherapy. But that night, sitting in her kitchen with Beatrice the chicken on her lap, something she did when the cancer anxiety got bad, Jennifer made a decision. She stopped expecting fairness. She stopped hoping Patricia would suddenly develop empathy. Instead, she opened her laptop and started researching. By 2 a.m., she'd read the entire Americans with Disabilities Act, 3 legal journals about service animals and assistance animals, and contacted 2 disability rights attorneys. By the end of the week, she had an appointment with Dr. Chen to discuss documentation. And by mid-May, Jennifer had assembled everything she needed. If Patricia wanted to play power games, Jennifer would show her what power really looked like when wielded by someone who'd already beaten cancer twice and had absolutely nothing left to lose. And on May the 28th, 3 days before the June 1st deadline, everything was finally ready. Patricia Moreland arrived at Jennifer's house at exactly 8 a.m. on May 31st, the day before the livestock ban took effect. Jennifer watched from her living room window as Patricia's silver Lexus pulled up, followed by two other vehicles, the HOA Vice President Marcus Webb and the community manager, Karen Schultz. They were here for what Patricia had termed in her email the final compliance verification. Jennifer had responded to that email with a single line. "Please come to the front door. I have documentation for you." Now watching Patricia stride up the walkway with a printed eviction notice in hand, Jennifer felt remarkably calm. She'd spent the last 3 weeks preparing for exactly this moment. Jennifer opened the door before Patricia could knock. She was dressed professionally, slacks, a blazer, her posture straight despite the fatigue that still plagued her. "Patricia, Marcus, Karen, thank you for coming. Before you serve that notice, I need you to review some paperwork." Patricia's smile was razor-thin. "Ms. Torres, the time for paperwork has passed." "You have until midnight tonight to—" Jennifer interrupted, her voice steady. "I need you to review documentation regarding my emotional support animals, which are registered under the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. These are legally protected assistance animals, and any attempt to remove them constitutes disability discrimination under federal law." The silence that followed was profound. Patricia's expression shifted from smug confidence to confusion, to something approaching alarm. "Emotional support? You can't just decide your chickens are emotional support animals. Ms. Torres, that's not how this works." Jennifer smiled, the same calm, professional smile she used with difficult patients in occupational therapy. "Actually, Patricia, that's exactly how this works. I have documentation from my oncologist, Dr. Sarah Chen at Memorial Hospital, stating that animal-assisted therapy is a medical necessity for my PTSD and cancer recovery. I have a letter from a licensed mental health professional confirming that my chickens provide essential emotional support that ameliorates symptoms of my diagnosed disabilities, and I have formal registration paperwork filed with the appropriate agencies. Would you like to see it?" She handed Patricia a folder. Inside were copies. Jennifer kept the originals with her attorney of Dr. Chen's detailed medical recommendation, a letter from the therapist Jennifer had been seeing since her diagnosis, registration certificates for each chicken as an emotional support animal, and a legal memo from her attorney outlining exactly how the Fair Housing Act superseded HOA regulations regarding assistance animals. Patricia's hands shook as she read, her face cycling through shades of red. "You're manipulating the system. These are chickens, not dogs. This is absurd." Jennifer's smile never wavered. "What's absurd, Patricia, is that you've harassed a disabled cancer survivor for 3 months over legal animals that cause zero disturbance. What's absurd is that you vandalized my property. Yes, I have you on camera breaking my coop latch on May 3rd at 6:47 a.m. What's absurd is that you've violated federal housing discrimination laws and possibly the Americans with Disabilities Act. Shall we continue discussing what's absurd?" Marcus Webb, the vice president, had gone pale. "Patricia, is this true? Did you damage her property?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Jennifer continued, her voice still calm but with an edge of steel that came from surviving 2 rounds of cancer. "Marcus, I appreciate you asking. I have time-stamped security footage of Patricia entering my property without permission and deliberately breaking my coop latch. I have screenshots of her social media posts about me that could constitute defamation. I have testimony from 3 neighbors that she lied on her petition about rats and noise. And I have documentation of every single interaction, including the HOA meeting where she used parliamentary procedure to silence me. My attorney has advised me that I have grounds for legal action under the Fair Housing Act, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and possibly harassment charges." She turned back to Patricia. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw the livestock ban immediately and issue a formal apology acknowledging that my assistance animals are legally protected. You're going to stop all harassment immediately. No more surprise inspections, no more complaints, no more social media posts. You're going to explain to the board that you failed to research federal housing law before implementing discriminatory policies. And you're going to pay for the damage to my property. $350 for the co-op repairs. Patricia finally found her voice, shrill with indignation. Or what, you'll sue the HOA? This is extortion! Jennifer's expression didn't change. Or I file a formal complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which investigates every Fair Housing Act violation and can levy fines of up to $16,000 for first-time violations, plus attorney fees. I also contact every local news station about how the Pine Valley HOA president has been targeting a disabled cancer survivor. I post my security footage showing you vandalizing my property. And I pursue personal legal action against you, Patricia, not just the HOA. My attorney is very confident about our chances. Karen Schultz, the community manager, stepped forward. Ms. Torres, I think we need to take this back to the board. Patricia, we should table this discussion and— No! Patricia snapped, her composure finally cracking. This is ridiculous. She's gaming the system. Those are just chickens. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet but absolutely firm. Patricia, I survived stage 3 breast cancer. Twice. I endured surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, and more pain than you'll hopefully ever understand. These chickens help me manage the PTSD from that experience. They give me purpose on days when the cancer anxiety makes it hard to get out of bed. And they are legally protected under federal law, which supersedes your HOA bylaws. Now you have two choices. You can accept my terms, or you can explain to the HOA board and a federal investigator why you thought it was appropriate to discriminate against a disabled resident. Marcus cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we should accept Ms. Torres's terms. This has gone too far. Patricia's face was now deep crimson. Her jaw clenched so tight Jennifer could hear her teeth grinding. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Patricia threw the folder onto Jennifer's porch. Fine, but don't think this is over, Miss Torres. Jennifer picked up the folder calmly. Oh, it's over, Patricia. And if you attempt any further harassment, my attorney has advised me that we'll have grounds for a restraining order. Have a good day. She watched them leave, Patricia storming to her Lexus, Marcus and Karen trailing behind with shell-shocked expressions. As their cars disappeared down Maple Ridge Drive, Jennifer closed her front door and let out a long, shaky breath. Then, for the first time in 3 months, she smiled. A real smile full of relief and satisfaction. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from being nice or reasonable. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly what weapons you have and how to use them. And as Beatrice the chicken clucked softly from the backyard, Jennifer thought that maybe, just maybe, she could finally have peace. The emergency HOA board meeting happened 4 days later, on June 4th. Jennifer attended with her attorney, Michael Rodriguez, a disability rights specialist who'd taken her case pro bono after hearing Patricia's harassment story. The meeting was technically private, but word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and the community room was packed with curious residents. Patricia sat at the head table, her expression stony, while Marcus Webb called the meeting to order. The agenda had a single item: review of recent Fair Housing Act compliance issues. What Jennifer hadn't expected was the flood of other complaints. As soon as Marcus opened the floor for discussion, 3 other homeowners stood up with their own stories. Tom Martinez, a 68-year-old veteran, described how Patricia had tried to fine him for his service dog being too large for the community. Denise Abbott, a schoolteacher, detailed Patricia's months-long harassment over her vegetable garden, which Patricia claimed violated aesthetic standards. And Rachel Kim, a young mother, tearfully explained how Patricia had threatened her with fines over her son's wheelchair ramp, calling it an Marcus had looked increasingly uncomfortable throughout the testimonies. Finally, he'd turned to Patricia. "Patricia, did you attempt to fine Mr. Martinez over his service dog?" Patricia's response was defensive and dismissive. "I was enforcing community standards. If we make exceptions for everyone, we might as well not have rules." Michael Rodriguez had stood up then, and his response was delivered with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years fighting exactly these battles. "Mr. Webb, board members, what Ms. Moreland describes as enforcing standards is actually a pattern of systemic discrimination against disabled residents, which violates the Fair Housing Act. Service animals, emotional support animals, and reasonable accommodations for disabilities are not exceptions. They are federally protected rights. The HOA's exposure to legal liability here is substantial. The board voted unanimously to rescind the livestock ban and issue a formal policy acknowledging federal housing protections. But the real bombshell came when Marcus, clearly having reached his limit, made a motion to remove Patricia as HOA president pending a full review of her conduct. The motion passed 3-1 with only Patricia voting against. Her face had drained of color as Marcus explained that the community manager would be conducting interviews with all residents who'd filed complaints. Patricia had gathered her things and left without another word, and Jennifer had watched her go with a mixture of satisfaction and something approaching pity. This wasn't just about the chickens anymore. This was about power, and what happened when someone who'd wielded it carelessly finally faced consequences. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. The community manager's investigation uncovered that Patricia had been selectively enforcing rules based on personal preferences, had accepted donations from certain homeowners in exchange for overlooking violations, and had used HOA funds for personal expenses. By July, she'd been removed from the board entirely and was facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement. Tom Martinez's service dog complaint triggered a Department of Justice investigation into the HOA's ADA compliance, and Jennifer's security footage of Patricia vandalizing her coop led to a misdemeanor criminal mischief charge. Patricia paid a $1,000 fine and completed 40 hours of community service. For Jennifer, the resolution was simpler and more personal. On a warm Saturday morning in mid-July, she sat in her backyard with her morning coffee, watching Beatrice, Dolly, Henrietta, and Marigold scratch happily in their repaired coop. Her neighbor, Tom Martinez, had come over with his golden retriever service dog, Max, and they'd shared eggs and conversation about the strange summer they'd all survived. Denise Abbott had brought tomatoes from her now-thriving garden. Rachel Kim's son had drawn pictures of Jennifer's chickens with crayons, which now decorated Jennifer's refrigerator. The community felt different, lighter somehow, as if Patricia's removal had allowed people to breathe again. Jennifer had learned something valuable through the whole ordeal. She'd spent so much of her cancer journey feeling powerless, at the mercy of her body's betrayal, dependent on doctors and treatments and luck. But this battle had reminded her that knowledge was its own kind of power. Federal disability law had been designed specifically to protect people like her from discrimination, and knowing how to wield that protection had made all the difference. She'd also learned that sometimes the people who seem most powerful are actually the most fragile. Patricia had collapsed entirely once her authority was challenged with superior legal force. The chickens continued their therapy work, though Jennifer never called it that aloud except in medical contexts. On bad days, when the cancer anxiety crept back in, she'd sit with Beatrice in her lap and feel the warm weight of living, breathing resilience. The chickens asked for nothing except care, and in return they gave her purpose, routine, and the tangible reminder that she could nurture life even when her own had been threatened. Dr. Chen had been right. Animal-assisted therapy was powerful medicine. As summer turned to fall, Jennifer sat in her backyard on a perfect October afternoon, her coffee growing cold as she watched autumn leaves drift down around the coop. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, free of harassment and threats. She thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered if the experience had taught her anything, or if she was simply bitter about being caught. Mostly, though, Jennifer didn't think about her at all. She thought about her chickens, her garden, her neighbors who'd become friends, and the life she'd built in the aftermath of cancer and HOA tyranny. Jennifer had learned that sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a judge. Sometimes it comes from refusing to be a victim, from doing the research, from knowing your rights and standing firm when bullies try to push you around. And as she sat there in the peace she'd fought for, watching her legally protected emotional support chickens living their best lives, Jennifer smiled. Because justice, whether served through federal law or simple karma, was equally satisfying. And her backyard, once a battlefield, was finally just a backyard again, the healing space it was always meant to be. Across the country in Scottsdale, Arizona, Marine Corps veteran James Whitfield was pressure washing his driveway when his HOA president demanded he remove the American flag from his front porch. "It violates our flag size restrictions," the woman announced primly, checking her clipboard. James set down the pressure washer and smiled, the same smile that had once preceded tactical decisions in Fallujah. "Ma'am, I'd invite you to look up the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. Federal law supersedes HOA regulations."